Welcome to this edition of Legislative Watch, where public policy is openly discussed and elected officials are able to report their activities directly to the people, unfiltered and unbridled. Today we have two very important subjects. We're going to be talking about urban renewal and nationalized healthcare, often referred to as ObamaCare. In the studio with me today are two excellent representatives who can tell us about urban renewal and nationalized healthcare. With me is Senator Monty Pierce, who's from District 5 in his 5th term in the Idaho State Legislature. Is that correct?
District 9.
District 9, excuse me, in your 5th term.
Yes.
And Representative Kathy Sims from District 4, and this is your first term.
This is my first term in the House. 10 years ago, I served a term in the Senate.
Okay.
That was an appointed position to fill a vacancy.
I see. All right. Well, let's start right off with urban renewal. Representative Sims has been working on this issue for at least a couple of years.
Oh, at least, it's hard to remember how long, but ever since I learned what it was and what it does, I began to oppose it and to try to bring some clarity to it.
Let's start with some basics. What is urban renewal?
It's a system of skimming off taxes from taxing districts and giving it to a board to spend on projects they decide on. It was originally intended to remove blight from community, but I know my community has never had blight, but they have millions siphoned off. So
for urban renewal,
for urban renewal.
So it was originally known as the Negro Removal Project.
Oh, is
the
that
what?
The Negro Removal Project.
Oh my goodness!
I researched it several years ago, and that's what.
Oh my gosh!
In Idaho, it started, I believe, in 1987. So it's been around a while.
It backfired when they planned it because they took the cities, and the one way they'd build freeways over the top of the areas where many blacks lived to move them out. And now it's backfired because they're not happy where their freeways are now in many of the big cities, but that was the origin of it.
Well, my experience with urban renewal goes clear back to the 70s when I was working in Christian education, and I was taking a group of youth to Portland, Oregon, and we were going to do some church work there. Well, we went to an area on the other side of the Burnside Bridge and met some people, and that's where we were introduced to the fact that they tore down what they call flop houses, you know, blight. And where were the men sleeping? They were sleeping under the Burnside Bridge. So, you know, I had thought that it sounded wonderful that they were going to improve the city and, you know, there wouldn't be these flea-infested flop houses. Well, a flea-infested flop house is a whole lot better than sleeping out in the elements under the Burnside Bridge. The people told us that crime had gone up and that these poor men that were sleeping out there were getting robbed. They called it jackrolled for their Social Security checks. So that was my first experience. And
I'm sure there was lots of reasons for urban renewal in the beginning, but I think what I've objected to most is what it's finally evolved to in the state of Idaho. And it simply is a way to give taxpayer money to private developers for projects they would like to do. It bypasses the voter on anything they do or anything they spend or anything they in debt for.
How is that, Kathy? I mean, who are the people that make these determinations and how do they get their positions?
Well, in every city in the state of Idaho can elect to have an urban renewal agency. Once they decide to do that, they appoint a board. The board is appointed by the mayor. And then from that point on, following a Supreme Court decision here in Idaho, the mayor and the city council have no further control over the URD. The board is in charge. So they can pick any project. They can, the money is given to them every year. It's
So there's no lines of accountability?
No lines of accountability. They report to no one. So, and they can, some do it right, and they do projects that the city needs, whether that be new water meters or upgrades to their sewer facility plants. Some do it right. Others do not. We gave money to private developers to put brick sidings on their building, $800,000. To do flower baskets downtown, to give $50,000 to the Downtown Association for parades and parties.
So this is urban renewal
And
money.
they call it urban renewal. And I believe since 2006, they've spent $162 million, never with a vote of the people, ever, for anything they spend or anything they end for.
Well, how many even urban areas do we have in Idaho? I mean,
there certainly wasn't any blight where they went to work in Coeur d'Alene. And so a group of us has started just fighting back and looking for legislation. The legislature started this problem in '87, and it's ours to correct. So we're trying to put some sideboards on it.
what are you doing in terms of legislation?
Last year we were able to pass the bill. I think it was Representative Nonini who carried it in the House. And it said whenever you're setting up a new agency, you must do it with a vote of the people before you even establish one. This year there were 3 bills introduced yesterday. I'll be carrying one, and that's to have the board of a URD agency elected. And then there was one by another representative that it has to be project specific. You have to say what you're doing this for. Is it the sewer disposal plant? Is it this? Is it that? And when that project is finished and paid for, you must end this urban renewal district.
So is there a lot of enthusiasm in the House for these bills?
Yes, there is. You know, we passed all of them last year. We had kind of a up against the wall in the Senate. But
yeah, that's where some of these good bills go to die, isn't it?
There's another one that's coming this year because, and it's Representative Nonini is carrying the one that will eliminate the power of eminent domain, because these boards were also given the power of eminent domain.
Oh my gosh!
And these are unelected officials with that kind of power in Idaho, and I don't think that's correct at all. So he'll be carrying that one. I'm pretty confident all of them will get out of committee. I'm also confident all of them will pass on the floor. So we'll see how they do in the Senate this year.
Well, that's a big thing. If they are at least elected, then there's some lines of accountability. But if they're presently just appointed, and then the person who appoints them has nothing to do with them anymore, they can pretty much play whatever they want to do, huh?
It's an amazing game that they play where I live, and I'm sure not all URDs are as bad as the one we have in Coeur d'Alene. But they actually give grants. If you go to their meetings that they have monthly, I mean, the line is out the door with people hat in hand just asking for money. So it's
and the power of eminent domain. After the Kelo decision, I think a lot of people have looked twice at that as well, where they can come along and take a person's private property and give it to some private developer, and the city and the private developer reap the benefits of it. But
the way they accumulate their funds is they'll map out a district geographically, and at the time they begin their URD, the base of what everything is worth on that day is all that will ever go to the general taxing fund. Any accumulation of new building or appreciation of any property within that district, all those taxes go to the URD. Now, I just built a new building. I'm a car dealer, and 100% of the taxes on my new building go to the URD, 100%. So somebody's paying for my police and my fire and my streets, etc., and so everybody else's taxes have to go up to pay for what is siphoned off by the URD. In Coeur d'Alene, it's about 18% increase in my taxes. Some towns have as Post Falls, I believe, had 6 URD districts going at one time. Theirs is 21%. I've heard there's towns further north that have as much as 70% of the tax collected by their city going to the URD. So if you wonder why California finally ended them all, these will grow, and they will take more money than your local government will if left unchecked.
well, if there's no accountability.
No accountability.
The article I saw in California, they have some amazing projects. I mean, everything from remodels to decorations. I mean, ridiculous things. And there were literally billions of dollars that will now flow back into the property tax coffers.
Well, you know, last week I talked, and the week before, I talked to people about the land board and how the state is kind of getting in the business of competing with private enterprise, in some ways that this urban renewal has the same effect, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Down in our college area, they've actually bought up houses on speculation, and all up and down 4th Street as well. They have over 25 properties that they've bought and are
with urban renewal?
With urban renewal funds, and they're just holding them. Some of them they fixed up as rentals, so they're competing in the rental market. They become slum landlords in some parts of my town.
But whereas the private individual who's trying to make a living tries to do it with their own money, you know, in a way, the private individual that's doing it with his own money is paying for his project and for the other project through the taxes.
Well, because when they buy the property, then they're off the tax rolls and they don't pay taxes on them, where a private enterprise absolutely does.
Well, I hope they didn't buy those 25 properties with any eminent domain abilities.
I don't think that was the case in any of them, or I assure you I would have found out about it.
After the Kelo decision, we passed House Bill 555, or Senate Bill, I think it was Senate Bill, and that took away the power of eminent domain. You can't remove property by the power of government by one individual and then resell it to another individual.
Yeah.
Well,
it only is exclusively for dams, highways, and those right-of-ways that have to be for the public good and
but
use.
even that, I had a personal experience when I was a legislator with some people who came to me who were having their land taken away from them, and I met with them, and the state's appraiser came in, and I happened to be a realtor, and so I did a market analysis, and theirs came in lower. And I said, well, could we have an independent appraiser? And they would not allow an independent appraiser who had no skin in the game, if you will, to come in. And these folks were told in their living room while I sat there, if you don't accept this, we can condemn the property and take it from you. That's just legalized
That's the
plunder.
power of eminent domain, and that's why it's so important not to give it to unelected officials who are responsible to no one.
Well, certainly in these times when people are doing the best to keep their homes and to keep their families fed, if we can save some tax money and allow the families to keep it in their bank accounts for their families, that would be helpful.
It would be helpful to businesses as well as families, because businesses within the URD that get the district that get their streets and their sewers and water all paid for by the urban renewal are competing against business that are outside of the district who bought their own sewers and streets and infrastructure. So
are you looking for people to come to testify, or do you think that this is going to go through without?
I think it's going to go through the House. I'm fairly confident on that. But there will be those folks who would come to testify if it goes to a committee in the Senate that has any opposition. So,
but you don't see, I'm surprised that there isn't any opposition.
Last year there were 9 urban renewal bills, if I remember right, and I think we only got one of them passed.
One passed.
So there's a lot of opposition to it.
1 out of 9. Okay, yeah. So there is.
And but we're back.
Okay, well, and it's nice nice for people to know that you're sticking with it, but you also need their support so that people need to be educated on the issues, and then they need to turn up and help if they feel that very strongly about this, and if this is a problem, they need to know about it.
I think the education of the taxpayer is really important in this issue, because it is a little bit difficult to understand, because the opposition uses, the increment financing and the owner occupation and all the terms that go right over the heads of most taxpayers.
Well, now you have a little pamphlet.
Yeah,
Can people get hold of a copy of this?
Absolutely.
How would they get a copy? When we come back from the break, we're out of time, but when we come back, maybe you can tell them how they can get a copy of it.
Very good, I'll do that.
We'll be right back.